Hello and welcome to Butterfly Journeys Midlife Adventures, where we share real stories of travel, transformation and new beginnings. I'm your host, Joanna Filmer, and I want you to know that midlife is our time to step beyond expectations and to use travel or even a relocation as a powerful tool for rediscovery and reinvention.
Hey, soul
Let's go.
sister, I heard you made another man cry, but don't worry, baby.
Good morning, Dawn. How are you? Where are you?
Good morning. Good morning. It's good to see you. I'm doing really well. I'm in Taiwan and I am in Kendang, Taiwan, which is very, very south in Taiwan.
Take us back to where you were then before everything started to change.
Yeah. Before I rebuilt my life. I was married for like 26 years and ended up getting divorced, and I was living in the States. And, of course, my kids were off at college, so I found myself on my own, at whatever I was, 253 or something at the time. And, once the grief and the tears and wine at night kind of started wearing off, I started doing things that I decided, if I'm going to change my life, if I'm going to do something different, it's going to have to be on me. Like, nobody's coming in to save me. Nobody's going to say, here's what you do next. So I literally put in for a transfer for the company that I was working for at the time. And I was living in Wisconsin in the United States. I had raised my family there, great little small town. But I decided I needed something more. I needed to, step more into the unknown and building my courage. Because after the divorce, I spent so much time just being afraid of doing anything on my own or making the next step. And I started by just taking little steps. Just going out to dinner on my own, or, I started doing some solo travel. And really through that solo travel that I did at the time, I really learned so much about, no matter how fearful I was about a situation or judgment of other people, if I stepped into that and I really learned how to harness that, I could harness it for courage and bravery and doing the things that I was afraid to do, right? So then I became like, I craved the unknown and I craved change, because every time I would walk through it and I'd come out the other side unscathed and like pretty good, but I also felt like this incredible sense of empowerment and strength. So decided it was time to leave that small town. My company transferred me to Texas and I started over in Texas. And then I was just there for 3 years when my company offered an early retirement. So it was real early, like I was 56, and I struggled with the decision for a year. Should I do it? Should I not? And I thought, I've always wanted to travel without a timeline. Like, maybe this is the universe saying, here's your chance. Like, maybe you're not going to get another chance to do something like this. So I packed everything up at the end of that year and took the early retirement and just started a life as a solo nomad. So I've been living nomadically outside the United States for the most part, other than for a little while. I came back during COVID, but outside the United States this is starting my 8th year. And I love it. I absolutely love the lifestyle.
One of the really important things you said there, in amongst many important things, was that concept of no one's going to come to save you. I think it's really important that's such an important, positive, empowering mindset to know that you've got to have your own back. You've got to step forward. So one of the first trips I think you talked about was to Belize, and it didn't quite go how you hoped. What did that kind of teach you in that process about letting go of the expectations of what you thought it might be and how it might feel and what it was going to give you?
Yeah. So Belize was my first solo journey. So I was still living in Wisconsin. It was probably about a year after the divorce, maybe. And it was my first solo trip. And I really had no idea what I was doing. And I arrived there and I didn't have, it was a little teeny cakewalk. It was a little tiny island. And I had signed up in some like crazy like rash of braveness to do a scuba diving course, which also terrified me. But I arrived there, and like my first problem was that I was afraid to go to dinner by myself, right? Like I walked to where I was going because I thought there would be taxis and stuff. And I got there and there wasn't. Like it was crazy. And that really kind of started something that night when I was stopping myself from doing something that I had to do and was like, it's either that or you're not going to eat while you're here. And what I discovered during that time there was more so about like my fear of judgment. And over the years now, that fear, like discovery that almost everything that had always held me back from doing something different, right, was a fear of judgment from family, from friends, but most of all through society. And I think that a lot of women go through that as well when they're thinking about making a change. I think it may not be on the surface for them, but often underneath everything that we fear is our fear of judgment. And I thought about it that evening and I thought, this judgment came from childhood. And here's the thing, like we all, I don't care who raised you, what kind of situation you come from, whatever. Judgment is sort of instilled in us from a very early age. We hear somebody, we hear a parent, we hear a neighbor, we hear a teacher say something about someone, and even not even something, negative, but we learn that everyone's being judged. And my thing was that I learned if everyone else is being judged, I'm also being judged. So I grew up with this like impression that the world, I write about this in the book, that the world is filled with like invisible measuring sticks, right? We're all being measured all the time and we're afraid to like what the outcome from that is or, what people are going to think of us. And once I started, like that was kind of that trip and figuring that out, that fear of judgment came from a very, very early age and I had carried it with me forever. And that was really the beginning of me deciding how to handle that, right? How to work through that and understand that like, it's not true. Like what I'm feeling like they're going to judge me for this. I'm sitting there eating by myself when in fact nobody gives a darn if you're eating dinner by yourself, right? Or nobody gives a darn if you're on the plane by yourself or you're at the movie. Like we have to kind of really think about every time that fear of judgment comes up, and it comes up all the time. It still does for me. I still have to address it. Where is this coming from? Is this true or is this not true? Because we put labels on ourselves, and sometimes they're true, and sometimes we need to address them. Okay, cool. Keep peeling back layers of yourself for better, but sometimes they're just not true. And I think that was my biggest takeaway from that first solo trip was to feel the fear, and that fear came from judgment. It almost always does, and do the thing anyway. And then that trip just changed the whole trajectory after that. I came back and I was like, hey, I'm moving to Texas. And then when the whole opportunity came up to retire, I said, why not? Like it just gives you such a sense of empowerment to kind of, sink into yourself and start understanding why you're fearing certain things or why you're thinking certain things that probably just aren't even true, right? And then change your whole mindset.
Do you think, because it's such a powerful observation of that process of self-judgment,
Mm.
do you think it's interesting that it never come up before? Do you think it was that space of taking you out of your home life and being in a different country or culture or completely something that was going to challenge you? Was that do you think it was that circumstances that gave rise to that kind of like knowledge and that understanding?
I think it was a lot of things. Because I had traveled before, not really solo travel, but we traveled with our family when the kids were young and that kind of thing. So I think more so it just came from months and months of sitting with myself, right?
Yeah.
And kind of really identifying my thoughts and are they true? Are they not true? And I think more so it was the divorce.
Yeah, right.
And my daughter got me into yoga at the time when we were going through the divorce. And just the quiet and the thought that comes from that, like taking everything else out of your mind and paying attention to the thoughts that do show up. And I learned that I can solve pretty much any problem or make any decision if I take the time to just sit in silence right? And I don't think we do that. So too often we go, okay, let's make a list and I'm going to pros and cons and here's how I'm going to make my decision instead of really getting into your body and feeling like, what feels right for me? What do I think is going to work right now? What makes sense? How do I feel about this? And I make all big decisions like that now. And I think that, I was just really getting into that at the time, even, there in Belize, that I was just starting to understand myself and how to um, really translate the way I was thinking and like shift it, right? Like completely turn it around. I'm a very much an introvert, maybe not as much now as I was then, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think sometimes introverted travelers are the best because we're paying more attention and we're very observant, right? But I almost like prided myself on hiding, right? That's why I named the book Let's Not Play Small. It was always like from the time I started kind of just writing about my thoughts when I was traveling and that kind of thing, I always signed off with hashtag Let's Not Play Small because at some point in time, it was soon after Belize, I'm sure, where I was just like, someone said the phrase to me for whatever reason, and it just made so much sense. Like for me, it means stop playing small with like the decisions that you make. Like almost use it as a rallying cry to do the big things, right? If you're afraid to do something like, let's not play small, what would that look like? That would mean, courage to try something new, courage to take like the next step, right? Courage to pretty much do everything. And it's why that the book is not so much about, it's cool that it's written through the lens of solo travel because there's a lot of cool solo travel stuff in there from 7 continents, but it's more about a much bigger theme of, inviting women to really step into the unknown and uncover the extraordinary within themselves. We have to really get uncomfortable sometimes to do that. And, through sitting in silence or sitting in stillness and even just taking the first step into something that's really uncomfortable for you, man, it just makes all the difference in the world. It's just, it's transformational, to do something you were afraid of, figure out why you were afraid of it and do it anyway. It's like there's no other power, that sense of empowerment. I've not found anything else that is as big as that. And so I'm always just trying to inspire women to do one. It doesn't have to be a solo nomad life. It doesn't have to be a solo trip somewhere. It can just be doing one small thing that you feel uncomfortable with. And boy, that sense of empowerment is really something else. And then it leads to more and more and more because you just keep building on that strength.
Yeah, your
So
courage grows as you go through the process
yeah.
of stepping into your fears. It's really important, you said there, about sitting with yourself and learning to listen to yourself and finding your intuition and your inner voice. I love the mantra. Having a mantra that you have that constantly reinforces what you're doing as you go through this process. Such huge
Yeah.
change going on. You said
Yeah.
that writing became like your traveling companion, that you wrote when you were lonely and you wrote when you were kind of like really happy and things that were going on around you. How did you
Mhm.
find that writing kind of helped you process what you were actually living through?
Yeah. Yeah, well, and I think, journaling is just good for
Yeah,
everyone, right?
yeah,
Because I think the act of actually doing it and getting it down on paper and, just the act of writing itself, they say is very self-soothing and, and that kind of thing. But when I first started, before I started this lifestyle, actually, another solo trip I did was to Vietnam. And this is when I was still living in Texas. And I just found myself wanting to write about not necessarily like, you should go do this and eat here and have a coffee there and like that kind of travel. It was more about like the experiences I was having with the people that I met. I talk in the book about meeting that lovely young woman sitting on a park bench in Vietnam and in where Hanoi. And she had been sent from her village to go there and learn English. And and I was just like, I thought I was like doing something really brave to come here by myself. But this young woman, like, left a small village, came to this gigantic place and was, she wanted to practice her English with me. And it was just like beautiful stories like that I was experiencing with people. And I mean, to me, that's why I travel is for the people, and seeing that the book is really an homage to the kindness of humanity, right? Because like the people I've met have taught me so much. And I remember, thinking about her afterwards, like, I kind of need to write about this because anyway, so I did, and it took me a while to be brave enough to share it, on my socials with friends and family. And then I just kept doing it after that. And then, so I just had all these like vignettes of the goodness in humanity and that I was seeing, and I talk about things like judgment and how we, family relationships and things like that. So my writing wasn't really your typical travel writing, and I think it resonated with a lot of people. And again, I always ended those with hashtag let's not play small. So then, yeah, the more I wrote, the more like just why am I feeling this way? I would suddenly I was on the Camino de Santiago, and I had so many things that were popping up while I was walking still about my marriage and what happened there and my place in that. And I realized I was still carrying so much stuff from that marriage, even though I had been like 5 years, previous that we had divorced. And I just found that as I processed all these things and then wrote them down, like it just made more sense to me, right? And I could actually come to some good conclusions about, or like put that story aside, because most of the time it wasn't a true story. I thought I was doing a certain thing or feeling a certain way or judging him or this or that or whatever was happening. And when I would sit in it or I'd write about it, I'd be like, that's not true at all. Like, here's what really is happening here. And so I think just the act of writing like that and putting things out there, like we just, if we're really being honest and if we're really, diving down into how we're really feeling, and sometimes that takes a lot of work. Sometimes that takes writing a lot to really get down to the basis of what's happening. I think that's when we really, learn and grow and transform ourselves, like on a regular basis. So yeah, I'm not writing as much these days as I was before. I mean, I did that for 5 years before I started writing the book. And so I share like a lot of, the first few years and then kind of snippets in between since then. So there's a whole lot of life lessons and, there's love stories and that kind of stuff in there too. But most of it is just transformation and reinventing ourselves from just the life of an average woman, not a famous author or anything like that, but it told through the lens of solo travel. And it seems to really be resonating with a lot of women who are ready for some midlife change.
Yeah, yeah, and it's a really important message to share. That's why I really enjoyed reading the book, and it's why I do what I do. And I think you talked there about the change through movement and leaving, and the constant growth that you've experienced. And you talked also about being in Belize and going into the restaurants. And I think one of the things that women think about, no matter where they are, and they get into midlife, and also the challenge of solo traveling or coming out of a relationship, changing things, the one that comes up a lot is loneliness, feeling lonely. How did you learn to sit with those feelings? Were they stronger in the earlier part of the process, like when you first started traveling rather? And has that diminished? How do you kind of, when those feelings come up, how do you process them?
Yeah, I know that is a big topic that
Yeah.
I see. And, a lot of women question, like, how do you deal with the loneliness? And I have to say that when I first started traveling, when I first started this nomadic life, I didn't really think about the loneliness so much then because I was so busy, like finding my way and figuring out and transportation and where am I going next? And so I was always doing and or writing. So I really never, and here's the thing, like if you want to have people to talk to when you're traveling solo, you can easily find people to talk to, right? You go to the closest, pub, or just honestly, like you can just have interactions with people at the park. Like it's possible even when there's a language difference. So it wasn't so much that, but there have been plenty of times when it was more of an existential loneliness, right? It wasn't a loneliness that was it will be fixed if I call my best girlfriend at home or I, talk to whoever, like, FaceTime with a friend. It was a deeper loneliness, and I think it came from all of the things that had been that it took to get to the place that I was at the time, which was I had been traveling for a few months at that point in time, and it was just like all the things, the language differences, the getting lost, the getting on the wrong buses, sometimes it would just get to be too much. And that's when I would tend to feel the loneliest. Or when I would see other couples traveling together. That was always a big one with me. Because I would love to be the second, in the whole picture there, whatever, have a partner. But those things I found made me feel more lonely. And then it became diving into it again, like, well, so why am I feeling lonely? Is this going to feel better if I just call someone and talk to them and who knows me really well and, we can just share what's been happening in our lives? Or do I need to look a little bit deeper? Like, is this loneliness coming from, sometimes it's just that I'm tired or I'm hungry or I've been moving too much and I need to stay in one place for like 3 or 4 days and just paying attention to how it feels if I take steps to reduce that loneliness, do a little yoga, go for a walk, do like actually movement for me resolves that loneliness. So, and of course, some women say, I'm afraid I'll be lonely and I want someone to share the fun and excitement with, right? Of being on a trip or being in a place. And I think that's valid. Like, there's plenty of times when I'm like, wow, I'm seeing this. I'd love to be sharing this with someone or whatever. But for me, I'm living a life that I absolutely love and that I worked very hard to create kind of from nothing. Right. And so I remember that in times when I feel like I really want someone to be sharing this with me right now. And, kind of fix it by sometimes I'll make a little video of where I'm at and share it with, one of my kids or something. And like, there's no way through loneliness goes away. It's not going to stay with you the entire time you're doing anything. It's a feeling, it's an emotion like anything else. It resolves. But for me, when it's the more existential loneliness that feels much deeper than just a phone call with a friend, I have to get out and move or I have to write, immerse myself in a deep book. That's my tool to kind of move away from that. And you won't always be lonely. Like, well, sometimes I'm just like, I just don't want to people for a couple days because I've had too many people.
That's right. And it
Yeah.
passes, all
But
all
it's
feelings
valid.
pass, all feelings
Yeah.
pass. It's so true,
Yes.
and digging into it or sitting with it, again, it's coming back to that sitting with it. If it's not just a phone call, then it's just sitting with it. You talked there about your
I do my best kind of writing when I'm out for long walks even. Like, it'll just
mm,
things will be going through my head or a phrase will come to me, and I'll be stopping and putting notes in my phone, like, whether it's I'm working through a loneliness or a fear about something or what have you, that movement, that walking always just, like, loosens everything up and lets things kind of bubble to the surface. That helps me look at it from a more clear perspective,
yeah. Really valid advice that is. You talked there about your friendships, and your friendships with women. I remember you talked in the book about your month in Argentina, sitting in the kitchen there. So they've been a
Yes.
real anchor for you on your journey. So what does sisterhood mean for you, and how has that come into play on this journey that you've been on?
It's funny because now I have I have my core group of sisterhood girlfriends back in the States, right? People I can call up, we text pretty often, we share things, I go back and visit every so often. But that sisterhood, like, I found it still very accessible, even traveling in other countries, right? I write about in the book, and I know you love Morocco, but I was in Morocco and I was kind of was feeling a little bit lonely. Realized I was feeling lonely for my sisterhood, for my girls, right? And I was at this park and there was this group of Moroccan women and they all kind of, travel in groups, you know what I'm saying? And they're all holding hands and they're chattering with each other. And I just sat there and I was really missing that, right? And one of them noticed me and came over and just started like, we were able to kind of communicate basic communication, but her communication to me, because I was trying to say to her that I loved seeing them all together. Like, there was probably 6 of them, and they were all just sitting and chattering and holding hands and talking. And I said, yeah, like, I really miss that. It's beautiful for me to sit here and watch that. And then her response to me was something like, but we would like to be you. We would like to be this woman who's traveling on her own and confident walking around Morocco and that kind of thing. So it's kind of just like, we always kind of want what we don't have or, what have you. But it was just a learning lesson to me that like that sisterhood can kind of be found anywhere. Like in Argentina, I was staying at a place in Buenos Aires, and I tell the story in the book, the woman Andrea that I was staying with, her and I became fast friends, and I was there for like a month, and she had all the women, like all her girlfriends and her mother's friends over for afternoon wine and cooking and that kind of thing. And it just being, even though our languages weren't the same, but we could communicate enough as women do. As women, we can communicate without a whole lot of words. Like it's just a thing that we do well. I think it's from being nurturing, right? And they just made all the difference in me in time when I was feeling a little bit lonely, right? Like just feeling like I had my close girlfriends, even though they just met me that day, but we became very in tuned to one another. So, I mean, there's just been lots of opportunities to do that. I still, of course, miss my closest circle, back home, and we do keep in touch, and I'll see some of them soon. But that the women sisterhood thing, that's I also love when people are doing like women's group trips, I think like you're doing and things, because there's just something about when you get a group of women together, especially cool, like women who are interested in the world and cultures and language and really kind of transforming ourselves or at least stepping into some form of transformation, like really good things happen. It's such a valuable, you know, thing that we women have together to do together. Yeah.
It really is, and it's I love what you spoke about there is how wherever you go, wherever you travel, you see women are doing the same thing, and it just lends to the power of travel rather than to be scared of it, to understand. It gives you that understanding that women and men, I guess life is the same wherever you go. The language may be different, the customs may be different, but yet you observe the practices of people and humans as you move
Yes.
around through cultures.
Yeah.
It's really
Yeah.
amazing things that you learn from that experience. And sisterhood is so important. You talked one that I'd like you to share a little bit about the Camino, because a lot of women do talk about the Camino way and they would love to do that.
Mm,
And you kind of talk about how you went there searching for purpose, but something
mm.
different came out of the journey. So would you like to share a little bit about that? What did it change? How did it kind of change your understanding of what purpose actually really is? And what was the experience of that process and being there on the Camino?
Yeah. I was only about not even a full year into this nomadic lifestyle when I did the Camino, and I was kind of coming off a lot of traveling around, and like when you do this, there tends to be like you can only travel so much without having some kind of a purpose, right?
Mm,
Like,
mm.
and I was a year into retirement. And even though I had this purpose that I was traveling and I was writing and that kind of thing, like I just felt like I had something bigger. And really I started the Camino just out of a challenge for myself to do it. It's what, almost 500 miles, I think, if I remember correctly, across Spain. And so I did it as a challenge, but I got so much more out of it. And when I started, I was like, well, maybe as I'm walking, like I'll have a better idea. Am I going to go teach English somewhere? Am I going to go work in an orphanage? Like I felt like I was ready to move to some kind of purpose, more purpose in my travel. And if you walk the Camino, you'll understand that everyone has a story. Right? Like very good. And everyone wants to share. There's something that happens when people start doing that pilgrimage. And I didn't do it for religious reasons. I did it again for a challenge. But you hear so many stories of like grief and joy and like transformation, loss, like it seems like most people do a pilgrimage when they have something that they want to heal. And I certainly heard enough of that, a lost child or a divorce in some cases, and some people just trying to, figure out their life or recovering from addiction even. And so you hear these like deeply personal stories, from people who are willing to share those stories with a complete stranger. And we all do it. Like, there's very few people who you would sit down with. You've been walking for 10 miles and you sit down all sweaty at some cafe to, have a water and an orange juice or something. And whoever you're sitting with, what's got you on the Camino is kind of the thing, because, and then the stories come out, like they're just, one woman was doing it because she was, um, had an illness. She was from Canada and she had an illness that was going to take away her ability to speak, like in the future, right? And so, like, there was just, so many stories. And so, really, what I found on that was just like the goodness of humanity, and like the sorrows that we all have, and how different people handle those kinds of like severe complications in their lives. And I don't know that it's not what I'm gonna tell people. If you have some like horrible thing going on, that you should do the Camino and it'd all be better. What the Camino does is it forces you're walking, you've got a pack, and you're walking 10, 12 miles every day. And again, like I was saying before, something about that kind of exhaustion and the heat and the constant movement, it breaks loose like emotions, and it brings things up from the depths of your being that you didn't even know were there. And then you're confronted with them. And are you going to set them aside, or are you going to just like, got another 8 hours of this tomorrow? Let's walk through it. Let's talk. And then you talk to other people, and it's just, it's very, people say that the Camino will transform you. It will change your life. For me, I think it was more about just learning that you can take all of these things that are bubbling up inside of you and start addressing them. You may not heal it completely, you may not fix it completely, but you're aware that they're there. And once you're aware that it's there, you need to do something about it, right? If you're going to live a fully like authentic life, as kind of as far as I'm concerned. So I didn't find a purpose on that Camino. What I did find, though, was just like an expanded, like the goodness of humanity, and how we've all got something, right? And also to walk through them. How often do we ever have 8 hours of every day for weeks on end to think about things about ourselves? And it wasn't all negative for me. There was a lot of joy and a lot of beautiful things that came of it. So, but it's just like, humanity at its finest on that
Yeah.
trail. Like, there's something
Yeah.
about people just will tell you their life story, and then you fix it, you work on it together. It's really beautiful.
I think, it's that movement again. Think also, you said something really important there about travel again as well. It gives you a space of almost anonymity, so that when you meet other people, you're actually more open to sharing your story. And through sharing your story, you learn about yourself and you learn about somebody else's journey as well. So
Yes.
it's a real gift. There's so many different things that come from travel, things that you don't
Um,
expect. And there
yes.
are challenges that come with travel. One of the things that I found quite interesting in your book, you talked about when you went to the ashram in India, and it wasn't a good fit for you. It was
Right.
misaligned to where you were at and what you was looking for. And I think
Yeah.
that might be really important to talk to share that story, because I have seen people. There was a post recently of a woman who was somewhere and she didn't want to be there and she didn't know what to do. So I think, sometimes you do get into those situations where you've gone somewhere, you had this expectation and it's not working. And then you're kind of like, what do I do with this? I don't feel comfortable, but can I go? Or so what happened and how did you deal with that situation?
And I think it all again comes down to getting to know yourself, and deciding if something's not right, that you have the choice to leave it,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
had gone to the ashram my first trip to India, and I was all about it, right? I was like so excited about it because I had been, studying and doing yoga for a few years before that. And I thought, this is where I'm really going to like find my enlightenment. And there's going to be all these people there that are all like, spiritual, and, doing all these things. And from the time I got there, and it was a popular ashram in India. And from the time I got there, it was, it kind of just treated offhandedly, right? Like I don't know, there's a whole story in the book, but there wasn't a space for me when I first got there. So I ended up in this, like the top of this building that was not really a room at all. It was just almost like an attic, and it was very hot, and it was a mat on the floor with a mosquito netting full of holes and all of that kind of thing. And it wasn't even that so much, but then I just didn't find much camaraderie with a lot of the people that were there. It seemed very competitive for me in the like yoga space, and then we would have different sessions every day that was like our spiritual guru talking about a way of living and a way of being in the world. And I was craving that kind of stuff. Like, that's the thing about this whole experience for me and living this lifestyle, is that like my curiosity is just like unabated. It's just, I'm interested in everything. So I was like, okay, let's hear all about it. And then but then if somebody would question that guru, then it was met with almost like a hostile response, right? Like, don't question me kind of thing. And I had, of course, the story. My karmic duty was to serve food. That didn't work out real well. And the whole time I would go to bed at night and just be like, I'm leaving tomorrow. I'm not leaving tomorrow. I'm leaving tomorrow. I'm not leaving tomorrow. And I'd be like, all the reasons I wanted to go were the reasons I needed to stay. Or I thought they were the reasons I needed to stay, because I was just like, you're being impatient, you're being judgmental. I was judging them as much as I felt like they were judging us, right? So it's just like a lot of those things. You're like, Dawn, you need to stay and you need to learn the lesson that you're obviously here for. It's uncomfortable. Your body hurts everywhere from the yoga you do every day. There's no place that's comfortable to sit. And so I stayed. Um, which was good. Like, I did learn some more things, but there came a point in time when I just said, this is not serving me or anyone else to be this miserable. This is one ashram. And I was like, I also think I had a little restlessness in me, because I was just like, I have the whole rest of India to see. I'm not really enjoying this. I'm feeling kind of out of place here. And I just decided one night, I was just like, I don't have to prove to anyone. I don't have to prove that I got awakened at the ashram or whatever. And so I just decided I can do this. I can leave. I can always come back, or I can go to another one someday. Like, I think we just have to. So it takes us a while. It took me a while, especially then, that was early on in my travels, to truly listen and say, this is not for you. It's okay to leave. Because that's, to me, what freedom is I can leave any situation that isn't working for me, whether it's a marriage, a friendship, an ashram, a country, so it's just, no matter if you're traveling or not, or you have a travel lifestyle or something or not, it's about really learning to understand yourself when something isn't for you, and don't do it just because it's society thinks that you should be doing it, you know?
Real battle, the internal battle between expectations that you set upon yourself, and
Yeah.
then really listening to your intuition and saying, no, actually, I'm going to serve myself because I know that
Yeah.
this is really what I should be doing.
Yeah.
And I'm going to honor these feelings and not try and
Exactly.
match the expectations that I've set out for
I
myself.
think I thought that, it would be some big, transformational experience. Once I really got to the gist of it when I was there, I was like, no, it's not. You're just miserable. Just leave. And I thought that I did for a second consider that I'd be disappointed in myself if I left. But I was there for like about a week, I guess. And I never had once I left there, I never had a thought of, oh, maybe I should have stayed. Because honestly, I was learning even more valuable lessons just from the everyday people I was meeting in India, from the little families that I would stay with. Or like, I saw the most beauty and humanity there,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
way more than I saw at the ashram. So I'm not saying all ashrams are bad. I'm not. I'm sure some of them are wonderful. That one just wasn't for me. So
It wasn't a good fit, and that you honored yourself and said, no, actually, this is not for me. I'm going to leave.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
okay to leave.
Yeah, it's okay to leave, and it's
Mhm.
okay to listen to yourself and whatever. And it's also not thinking that you need to conform or honor an outward expectation from others, because there can be those situations. I
Yeah.
had someone recently say to me that they were somewhere and they wanted to leave, but they didn't want to let themselves down. And I said,
Right.
well, what do you mean? And it was around the expectations that they set for themselves or how others saw them, that they'd
Yeah.
set this kind of like standard of what they were going to do.
Yeah.
You've talked about on your journey self sufficiency being the greatest kind of like gift of solo travel. What do you mean by that, and how has that come about through your journey through the travels through the past 7 years?
Yeah, I think like self-sufficiency and perseverance, right?
Mm,
Because I think they kind of go hand in hand. Like when I first started this lifestyle, I didn't know anything really about anything. Like, right, like I just really was playing it by ear. I was winging it. I was making lots of mistakes, and I just kept learning the lessons from that, right? And then like, here's the thing, if we always try to play safe, if we always try to play small, if we always say, I don't want to do that, I'm afraid I'm going to make a mistake, I don't want to look foolish, I don't want people to judge me, all these kinds of things, then we live in this small little space that doesn't like lend room for growth. It doesn't give you any room for growth, right? So every mistake, like I just learned from every mistake, and then those things all sort of like stack up on one another, right? You learn from this mistake, you use it to make a better decision the next time. Then you make this mistake and you go, "Oh, okay, I'll learn that for the next time." And then pretty soon you have an increased self-confidence in your own personal abilities. Believe me, if I could do something like this, like anyone can do something like this. I don't have any great special powers or anything like that. What I do have is perseverance and knowing that I can make a mistake and I can figure it out. Like everything is figure outable, you know? It still happens today where I'm just like at a train station, just happened the other day. I had no idea what I'm doing. I have 15 minutes before I think the train is, before the train's supposed to be like you figure it out. If you make a mistake, like nothing really is the end of the world, right? And not being afraid to ask for help is something that I had to learn too, in terms of that self-sufficiency, because nobody can just do it on their own. So you have to be in life, not even just in travel, but just in life, like it's okay to ask for help. It's sometimes the greatest gift you can give to another person or a family member, a friend, is asking for their help. It's an honor, right? We think it's an honor if someone else asks us. So I've kind of reframed that in my mind too, that like it's okay to ask for help. People like to do
yeah,
it. Yeah,
yeah,
it's a gift.
and you're right. If somebody asks you for help, you want to help.
Hmm.
And it's also
Yeah.
getting past the any feelings of shame that you have. And you've talked a
Mm,
lot about with women, and how women are kind of like conditioned almost. You talked about to be agreeable and selfless and
mm,
good, and to
yeah.
keep going. What do you think is so? What did you kind of let go of to kind of live now to this, like where you're at now, and to live more truthfully?
I think the biggest thing that I let go of is kind of a need for perfection and like productivity. Maybe you could like when before this, my life, as in most women, it was set up for what are you gonna do to be productive, whether it's work or motherhood or that kind of thing, and always like being put together, like having it figured out, right? And once I was able to sort of let that go, and I think I was able to let that go because I was making mistakes and the world wasn't ending, and I was able just to say, "Oh, okay, I learned from that. I can do better with this." And whether I mean, sometimes, of course, sometimes I think shame though more than anything comes from um is experienced when you've hurt someone else, right? And so I don't really feel that so much when I'm making my own decisions and deciding that something or a person or whatever isn't for me, as long as I'm not hurting somebody else. So there's no shame in like being out there and making mistakes, and I think I got off track what your original question was, but
No, but that's okay. It's just thinking about, it's really, you talk a lot in the book about how women are conditioned, and to actually go off and do like you're doing now and living that kind of free life, independent life for yourself and being truth and living in your own truth.
Mhm.
Um, some women feel that guilt or they feel shame because they feel like they should be doing what they're expected to
Yeah.
do and, serving whoever it is that they should be there serving.
Yeah. Let me I just want to read you um a little excerpt, if I can find that now, about that and about like the blinders that we wear. Some people thought I'd lost my mind. This is when I decided to start a nomadic lifestyle. Hell, sometimes I thought the same. Who does this? Who completely transforms her life and takes this gigantic risk at 56 years of age? Me, the woman who throughout her life had worn blinders like the horses drawing those fairy tale carriages of our youth. They're designed to block our peripheral vision and draw us into a straight line. Get a job, get married, tether yourself to people, places, and things. No swerving from the formula, don't you dare. Do not even dare to wake up one day and realize that another life exists. But I did, and I resolved to pursue a life far from the ordinary. So
Love
that's
that.
just yeah, it's just, we have so many expectations on us that we don't even think about. Of course we don't. It's just, it's life. You're supposed to get married. You're supposed to get a job. You're supposed to have kids. You're supposed to, and then midlife, what are we supposed to do in midlife? I don't know. The kids are gone. Sometimes the marriage is gone. And, so I really wanted to write in here as inspiration and encouragement, not even to solo travel, but just as a woman to take a look back and go, that's not really, I can do so much more. I can be so much more than these things that they said I was supposed to be all this time. And usually to start doing that, it takes doing one thing that scares you a little. Pick one thing that scares you a little, and you have to do it. Nothing changes unless you take that first step. And then after that, it builds on itself. Then you challenge yourself to the next one. And pretty soon you're just like, I'm not at all who I thought I was, and everyone. And not that it's negative, all those things, right? But you just become a bigger version of yourself and really just a wiser, deeper woman by just stepping outside your comfort zone, little teeny steps. It doesn't have to be big, just little teeny steps. It feels amazing.
So any woman that's listening and kind of is starting to feel that something within inside of them that's asking those questions and they're feeling afraid to trust it, what would you say?
Would say just do it. Do whatever it is. It doesn't have to be a big trip. It can be something small in your life that you want to change, because everything starts with that small change, right? And you build on that. So do it scared, do it messy, do it with mistakes. Just, go and do it, because it all works out. It will all work out.
Well, so the final question then, when you think of the woman you were before you began this journey, what would you want her to know about like kind of courage and loneliness and what was coming towards her? What would be your biggest piece of advice, do you think?
I think it would be to, I would tell her to trust, to have much more trust in herself um, than she did throughout her whole life. Like, trust in ourselves and our abilities, and have confidence even when you don't know what you're doing. Like, by taking these little steps, you can actually create, you can be whoever you want. You could really be whoever you want with these small changes. Not that mine has changed all that much, but really just, to trust in yourself, trust in your abilities. And I didn't have that much before, but now I do.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Dawn. What a wonderful conversation. And so
Oh,
much
thank
in
you so
here.
much.
I absolutely loved reading your book and it
Uh,
resonated with me on so many different levels. And I think for any woman who's thinking about this midlife experience of what's coming and what do they want and what do they want coming next.
No, it's not all serious. It's kind of
No,
funny. It's
yeah.
humorous, it's heartfelt, it can be sad, it can be hard, and that kind of thing.
Thank you so much, Dawn. You've been listening to Butterfly Journeys Midlife Adventures with me, Joanna. Until next time, may you keep awakening, emerging and evolving on your own midlife butterfly journey. Follow the podcast, hit subscribe and share it with your fellow midlife butterflies. And if you have a story to share, reach out. My emails and DMs are in the show notes. I would love to hear from you. Your journey could inspire another woman.